Hi everyone. So the only reason I haven't made this video a bit earlier is because honestly I was exhausted. I'd been up all night, I needed a rest. And honestly I also wanted to just compose my thoughts because I won't lie, I was gutted by the election result. I was very depressed by that. But it is what it is. Donald Trump has won the election, and this isn't even a case of, well, he won the Electoral College but not the popular vote. The figures are, as it stands, are as follows. Trump's got 295 electoral college votes, Harris 226. They need 270 to get over the line. And I remember, like I said, I was watching this all night. It was Wisconsin that pushed Trump over that line. I remember for a long time, about an hour, it was hovering on the 266 mark. And there was this tiny, tiny, faint glimmer of hope that Harris would somehow pull off a miracle and get the remaining 7 states, even though they were all veering towards Trump. So he's carried 28 states, and Maine's second congressional district, I believe, and Harris has carried 18 states, and Nebraska's second congressional district, if I've got that right. There are two states still to declare, which is Arizona and Nevada. They'll probably go to Trump. So he's probably going to get somewhere in the region of, I think, Nevada 6 electoral votes, if I can't remember. Arizona, it's 11 or 12, something like that. So he's probably going to get over 300. Clearly a victory for Trump. There's no way to gloss that over. He's got about 73 million votes. Harris has got about 68 million, not including the two states that's declared yet. Um, that's a victory. It's still significantly less than what Joe Biden got in 2020. It has to be pointed out. I would say this was a clear victory for Trump. I wouldn't say it was a landslide. You can't compare it, for example, to um, Reagan versus Mondale or Bush versus Dukakis. It's not that sort of absolute sweep. It's a it's a solid win for Trump, but it's I don't think it could be called a landslide. I'd call it a strong win, not a landslide. Um, and some of the wins were predictable. She got California, New York. Got Virginia, which is interesting because Virginia had once been quite a red state, and in recent years it's went more blue. Unfortunately, she didn't get a single one of the swing states. I did think at some points during the night she would get North Carolina, but that hasn't transpired. And I think the trajectory that would have really worried the Harris campaign is when the three northern blue wall states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, went to were veering to the Trump campaign, and obviously he's won those states. In terms of what the next 4 years will look like, in terms of what Trump will actually do, there's it's to be considered the things that he said, his threats to break up NATO, his vows of mass deportations, his vows of revenge on domestic opponents. Trump made a victory speech before it was formally announced by any of the networks, i.e., when it was still on 266. I mean, he was going to win, but he made that victory speech somewhat prematurely. I mean, he's won. There's no question about it. But it was a pretty Trumpian speech. It was a lot of babble, basically, about Elon Musk's rockets and thanking some of the people in his entourage, and it just he was talking about unity for America. Now, I say babble because a lot of people will rightfully say, we'll believe it when we see it. This is a man who has been so divisive for so long, and his rallies recently have been absolutely toxic in terms of the things he's put out there. So, if he really means that he will unify the country, he has to prove that. It might help if he drops his vows of revenge on domestic opponents. Unfortunately, he'll probably get presidential immunity now from his criminal convictions. That in itself is a disgrace. But it is what it is. There's no way to look at this other than America has went to the right. Because if Trump had won the Electoral College but Harris won the popular vote, I would say this is a reminder of how flawed the system is. But he has won both. That's just the reality. Um, I was looking at analysis on CNN and I was looking at other networks as well, but they knew what was going on here. They knew she was going to lose, and they were analyzing this. Um, and they have I forget the guy's name, a sort of balding guy, I guess mid 50s. He's a Trump supporter and Republican. And he kept talking about the liberal elites. And David Axelrod, Obama's former campaign manager, pointed out, I think it was Axelrod that said this: people who vote for Harris are not elites. They're not all Silicon Valley millionaires. Um, I think there is a perception, this is me talking now, that there is sort of a celebrity elite that tends to go for the Democrats because celebrities tend to do that. Everyone from Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio, Cardi B, who I don't like. I think she's a vulgar character. So I was kind of disappointed that she had front and center in one of Harris's last campaigns. But regardless, there is a lot of celebrities on the Democrat side, no question about that. The media was largely biased towards Harris. I think we have to be honest about that. Um, but I do say that the point of journalism is not to be absolutely neutral, it's to report the truth as you see it. Um, and Trump has basically demanded that the media kowtow to him, so that's his record. But even allowing for all of that, this perceived liberal elite bias, um, how does that explain how conservatives went over to Harris's side? So I don't think it's a simple case of left versus right. I think probably the reason her campaign failed is because the economy can never ever be underestimated in an election. I don't think the Democrats were wrong to highlight Trump's rhetoric, to highlight things he has said and done. I don't think they're wrong to do that. But it is true that if people are struggling, and I said this in previous videos, if people are struggling to pay their bills, if you have a loaf of bread that's $9 or a box of cereal, I think what's it called, then honestly, issues about democracy and abortion rights and all that sort of thing, important as they are not going to be the priority. I think it was also assumed by the Harris campaign that women would immediately vote on the abortion issue. Many women are also struggling with the cost of living. And she was vice president in the last 4 years. So she's going to be tied to that, um, you know, Biden's difficult economy. I do think that they were inheriting a lot of the mess that Trump created. Trump left America with, this idea that he had a wonderful economy is, I think, very disingenuous. With high unemployment rates, his response to COVID caused severe problems. His lackluster response to COVID, Biden and Harris had to pick up from all of that. And I'm not saying they're not responsible for the last 4 years. Obviously, they are, and they should take blame for a good bit of that. But I will also say this, and people might be surprised to hear me say this because usually I do not go for identity politics. And I think Hillary Clinton was wrong in 2016 to say it was sexism that cost her the election. Millions of men supported her. Likewise, millions of men have supported Kamala Harris. But I will say this: I think there will be some people in America who just in their mind cannot accept the idea of an ethnic minority woman president, especially if she's on the political left, because they will almost put up this thing of, well, she must be far leftist, she must be a radical. I do think there's Americans who kind of saw Harris as some sort of modern day Black Panther, like this radical far left type. I really don't think she is. I honestly see Harris as a centrist. As a centrist, that's why I've supported her. Vocally, obviously, I can't literally support her, but I've never seen her as a far leftist. I think she's a politician. There will have been times she's pandered to the woke left, which I don't like. There's some of her positions I don't necessarily agree with. For example, when she spoke about defunding the police, that's ridiculous. Um, but her record is, I've seen people say she's a token candidate. It's just Biden trying to look woke. I think that is incredibly short sighted. It ignores the fact that this is a woman who has dedicated her life to public service, who served in California as a prosecutor. You know, so much for being a liberal Californian. She was a prosecutor against serious criminals. Um, the character that she has, the integrity she has, and I'm going to talk more about this regarding her concession speech and how I think the Democrats should go forward. But I mean, I think Republicans were scraping the barrel. I should say MAGA Republicans when they were attacking how she laughed. I mean, really, how she laughed as if Trump is somehow the personification of grace, and it's just incredible. Um, I'll be honest, I was surprised at the result. I thought she would win. I didn't think it would be resounding because I wasn't naive. I knew America was divided enough that many people wouldn't vote for her. But I thought she would win. I honestly thought she would win. Um, I am surprised that America in 2024 apparently is even more pro Trump than America in 2016. I am genuinely surprised by that. Everything that has been said and done. I do find that sad. And whilst I'm an outsider, I respect the Americans' right to vote for whoever they want as president. That's their destiny, their leader. There is an exceptional situation here. We hear about American exceptionalism. Well, there is an exceptional situation. Almost no other country, even other powerful countries, do people look at it and say, whoever is leader of that country will really have an impact on the rest of the world. I mean, in the case of Russia and China, they're, perpetual dictatorships, so that doesn't really count. Um, in the United States, other powerful countries, Brazil, India, France, Britain, Germany, there's international interest for sure. When those respective elections happen, there'll be focus on them, but they don't have the sort of global impact an American presidential election does. It's a huge event. Um, because for one thing, Trump's attitude to NATO, what will his response be to Ukraine and Russia? All of these questions have geopolitical consequences that go well beyond domestic issues in the United States. But I do think it will be a grim 4 years because you can be sure, and it isn't just Trump's win, the Republicans have now got control of the Senate. So he's backed up by Republican senatorial wins as well, which means that the next mass shooting that we see, you can be absolutely sure we'll hear thoughts and prayers from the Republicans, but pretty much nothing else. I would say, though, respectfully to Trump supporters, he's going to let you down in some areas. I mean, he's speaking about mass deportations. Let's say there's about 11 million undocumented people in the United States. Now, practically, even with congressional support, Trump just can't do that. I'm not talking about moral issues here. I mean, practically. How the hell do you physically do that? Even if you get a few million, there's just so many people that it's. I think that Harris's proposal of an earned path to citizenship was much more sensible. Um, you know, it wasn't giving a green light to people to break the law, but it was saying that this is a practical way to deal with this, and it's an earned path to citizenship. Um, I I think obviously once it was clear that he was winning, other world leaders, Starmer, Macron, Zelensky, congratulated him. I see that in this country, Kemi Badenoch is already attacking David Lammy for supposedly anti-Trump comments he made years ago. That's pathetic. I mean, we're going to hold up people for criticizing Trump, which is millions and millions of people, then shouldn't he be scrutinized for the things he says? And that's just bad enough playing domestic politics. He's just trying to have a jibe at David Lammy for that reason. I think it's pathetic. Um, you know, David Lamy's the foreign secretary. He knows he's going to have to work with Trump, and he clearly said that before this election. He clearly said we'll work with whoever's American president. So far, I'm quite impressed by David Lammy. I think he has been tough where he needs to be. I think he's been diplomatic where he needs to be. Um, but this is one of the things I really don't like about British Trump supporters, the fact that they will actually parrot the American president over our own government. I mean, I remember when British ambassador to Washington was in this feud with Trump, supposedly things were leaked, and I heard British Trump supporters actually attacking him. Now, an ambassador should be able to have the confidence that his thoughts and observations about the post he is working in can be treated with some confidentiality, and that was betrayed. So, but that's that issue. Um, Clearly, the Democrats are going to have introspection here. I do think the economy thing was hugely important, and as much as I think it was legitimate to talk about issues like democracy and Trump's character, etc., in the end of the day, if Trump was managing to win people over on that, you know, it's very difficult for any presidency that has had economic problems to rebound. That and that history shows that. Had Biden been on the ticket, he would have lost even worse than Harris. She always had an uphill struggle. I mean, remember, she had a roughly 3 month campaign. Most people who run for president are either an incumbent president or someone who has been prepared since the primaries 2 years before. Harris had about 3 months. So, in that context, she didn't do too badly. And I honestly look at her campaign. Maybe there was a few mistakes she made. For example, she was asked one question, I think it was on Oprah Winfrey show, um, would she have done anything differently from Biden on the economy? And she just point blank said no, she wouldn't. That was foolish. She should have said, I have the greatest respect for President Biden, but I recognize many Americans are struggling and I will address this issue. Instead, she allowed herself to be too attached to Biden. And it's a difficult one because, she didn't want to look ungrateful to her boss for giving her the role as vice president, but I think that was a missed opportunity. There were also points where the Harris campaign didn't sufficiently push back. For example, when Trump absurdly claimed that she hated Israel, they didn't sufficiently push back on that, perhaps. But again, that was a major balancing act because many young Muslims voted against Harris for that reason. Personally, I think it's a strange choice to do that, as if they think that Trump is going to represent the Palestinians in a better way. I mean, if anything, he will be even more supportive of Israel. So I don't understand young Muslims in Michigan who voted for Trump for that reason. Um, I think the Democrats would be wrong to say that this is just a question of racism because the fact of the matter is many black and Hispanic Americans, particularly men, vote for Trump. Um, I think that from what I've seen in interviews, those guys said they done so because they think it'll be better for the economy. It remains to be seen if that's true or not, but that's why they done it. That was what I saw the main reasoning for voting for him. Um, it is true that there are people who will own it, and I think Axelrod acknowledges there are people who will only vote for Harris or only vote for Harris because she's a woman. There will be feminists out there who only voted for Harris for that reason. I mean, as their primary reason, or perhaps some black women who only voted for Harris for that reason. But being how divided it is, there will absolutely be Americans who only voted for Harris for the opposite reason. There will be misogynistic men out there who just will not cast their vote for a woman president, particularly if she's from the left. I do believe that. I don't think it's the mainstay. I don't think it's the. And Axelrod acknowledges you cannot dismiss all Trump supporters as being racist or sexist. That would clearly be absurd. And Harris, when Biden made that ridiculous comment about maybe they're garbage, and I know he says he was only talking about speakers and not all Trump supporters. It was foolish, and it didn't help anyone. And Harris immediately disavowed it. She said she rejects any attempt to vilify Americans based on who they vote for. She said that quite clearly. And another thing during her campaign, she clearly didn't play up the fact that she's a woman and she's a minority. She didn't disown those facts, but she never ever said, you know, vote for me because I'm a woman, vote for me because I'm black. She never said that. Maybe some of her supporters did. She never did. She was talking about issues like gun violence, abortion rights, um, the struggling middle class, all those sort of bread and butter issues. She wasn't talking about identity politics as much as some would assume she did. In fact, I would argue she ran a campaign not that different from Obama's in 2008, except she had to talk about Trump as well because John McCain was a far more decent and conventional opponent than Donald Trump was. Um, anyway, I could say a lot more on this, but I think that will probably suffice. It's bitterly disappointing. I knew she wouldn't have been a perfect president. I knew there would have been things I disagreed with, but just to have Trump consigned to electoral history would have been really, really refreshing. And now we have another 4 years of him. That means that from 2015, first entered mainstream politics, to when he completes his term in 2029, assuming he does, and I should close with that argument, Trump will have been in American politics, the front line of American politics for 15 years. Very few other figures can say that. Franklin Roosevelt, Richard Nixon, I'm talking about people who've absolutely been on the front line for that long. Um, he has been an absolutely dominant figure. I love Trump, but I will give him that. He is definitely one of the most significant political figures of the 21st century, often for the wrong reasons, but he has. I mean, he won't be forgettable. His namesake, or not his namesake, but the only other president who done two non-consecutive terms, Grover Cleveland, is, in all honesty, quite a forgettable president. A decent man, renowned for his honesty and hard work and ethics, but forgettable. He's the only other person to have done two non-consecutive terms. But the contrast between him and Trump, the only other thing they had in common is they're both New Yorkers. But Grover Cleveland was such a parallel to Trump. He may actually get more attention now historically because people will be aware of that fact now. Um, there'll no doubt be a lot more to say about the subject. I hope that Harris's supporters are sensible. I know Cardi B has been running her mouth talking about violence against Trump supporters. That's stupid. But what do you expect from a rapper? I mean, I have no time for Cardi B. Um, and I think honestly she's embarrassing to the Harris campaign. I wouldn't, if I were Harris, I wouldn't have given her such elevation. But it's just thoroughly depressing. But it is what it is. We have to work with it now. That's what it is. Last words. I may say this in another video, but it's at the end of this one, and I know a lot of people that watch the whole video. Will Trump serve a whole 4 years? He's 78 years old, and clearly people have deemed that he is more mentally acute than Biden is, although I would question that. But let's say something happens to him. You know, he's an old man. Let's say he has a stroke. Let's say something happens to him in the next 4 years. Um, God help us, JD Vance will automatically become president. And maybe, I made a video on Vance, maybe Vance was weighing this up. I mean, Vance is only 40 years old. And I'm not sure what the 22nd Amendment allows, but I know it limits term times after what Franklin Roosevelt, he controversially sought a fourth term and won a fourth term. Now, I don't know if Trump can legally run again in 2028. He said if he lost this time he wouldn't run again, but he has won. So will he run again in 2028 at 82 years old? I can see it. I mean, if Biden is showing his age, there's no reason to think Trump won't either. So um, I can actually see Trump not serving a full term. I can see, well, he won't be impeached because now there's senatorial control, but I can see something really happening during his term that will disqualify him from the presidency, not disqualify him. He'll be forced to do a Nixon-like resignation, although that's hard to see with Trump. But so I do think something will happen in the next 4 years that will affect his presidency and force him out of office. I hope so. And I'll say one last thing. I hope no idiot tries to kill Trump in the next 2 months. I hope there's no more assassination attempts. Because if something happened to him, if he died, um, firstly, J.D. Vance would be president, so Trump project would continue. Secondly, it would martyrize him, and it would absolutely whitewash all the things he has done wrong, and all the things he said, and all the things he's done, because he'll become a hero. He'll be martyrized. So I hope that doesn't happen. I hope the next 2 months are peaceful. Um, And then inauguration day, whether I watch it or not, I don't know. I probably will. It was still a presidential inauguration, but I certainly won't be watching it with um, any joy. Right, I'll wrap this up.